Where are we now? We're all done. So now, where's Councillor McDonald?
I'll just grab,
Sorry, interrupting the person.
so we're up to the last one. It's weird.
Yeah, I think we do.
Well, that's a good point actually. I don't know if Lynn's...
I don't know if we're ready. I don't know. I'll have to find out.
Yeah.
Ask Peter. Peter will be able to know.
Hello. Right, we're in your hands, Peter.
Okay, look, this is perhaps not a major body of work. It's really just to give you some comfort that where the process around the long-term plan is at. Obviously, a lot of the focus of this paper is for the newer councillors who may not have been across LTPs before. I'll save you a lot of reading. The LTPs are based on about a 390-page act. The upshot of which is that you have the capacity to make almost any reasonable decision about your city and your portfolios, provided it's transparent to the public, which is what LTPs are basically for. The principle is good, the execution is a little clunky, but that's the legislation that we're looking at. What I'm trying to stress for you today is the preparation that's been put into getting to where we are. So that includes the strategic framework that you've approved, the letter of expectation from you and the Mayor on how the process is to run and the priority areas in it, the work we've already put in with Runanga to understand their needs going into the LTP at the start of the process as a partner, the role of climate resilience in the LTP, which was tentatively there in the 2021 model, but is much stronger this time. The need for a deliverable capital program and the joint development process that we start on the 1st of August. You'll see a little diagram there that illustrates the principles I'm talking about, which is that iwi engagement, strategic priorities, customer feedback, climate resilience are there at the very start of the LTP. That's quite different to previous models where we've built a draft and then tried to pass it through those filters at the end, which was not, I wouldn't say, very effective. So the progress update, you've heard a little bit of this the other day. In terms of iwi partnership, Papatipu Runanga have been doing a lot of work with us about what they're looking for out of this LTP. Mary Richardson, as you know, is working on that, and she's working directly with heads of to make sure it's built into their planning. The strategic framework has been front and centre in the development process. We will bring you drafts of basically the LTP starting 1 August, and that framework is front and centre in that process. You've had the resident survey results, and while they're the usual mixed bag, they've been supplied to heads of to build into their planning. Climate resilience, you heard from Lisa early the other day, and the mechanics of how that's been built into the process. Activity and infrastructure and financial strategies, you'll be hearing more about this afternoon at the LTP briefing. Activity plans are on track. Now they're drafts, and I will stress they are first drafts, but the intention from the letter of expectation was always that we wouldn't bring you polished, late, final, just sign it, that it would be a genuine co-development, joint development process. Asset management plans, variable quality there. It's fair to say that some areas have gotten quite strong data, others still catching up. There is a capital prioritisation model we'd like to discuss with you to bring the proposed program, which is high, down to a deliverable level, and also to have a discussion about what deliverable actually means. So there's some science behind that debate. Pre-engagement, you heard from Katie the other day that there is a very successful, very positive pre-engagement process out there across the city. Tessa briefed you the other day on that. And of course, there are always risks. This is the biggest process we run, and it's also the flagship of your term in office. So the risks are actually pretty obvious. Balance. You have to balance off capital, OPEX, the rates increase. Achieving a deliverable capital program over the life of the LTP. We've done the year ahead sometimes. We've never actually looked at the entire breadth of an LTP and bringing that to a deliverable level across that whole span. Easy when you say it quick. I suspect it will be much more challenging than it looks. Balancing future-oriented work and new work like climate resilience with keeping the lights on and BAU. That's a juggling act. There's a lot of uncertainty around central government reforms. We talked about that the other day, Three Waters and so on. There's also uncertainty about long-term economic factors. We talked about the need for underpinning assumptions, and if those assumptions change, we flow them through the document. Successful partnerships with key stakeholders is a time-consuming process, but I feel that the time is being invested. Successful project management, hitting our marks. You know, basically, if we say we're going to do something by this time, we actually do it. There is always a tendency for long projects like the LTP to be sidelined because of today's operational firefight. That of course can happen. If it happens a lot, you end up with backlog, and that's a punishing thing on you as well as on staff, because it means intense periods of catch up. And a successful joint development process between now and Christmas. So we're working closely with the risk and assurance team to make sure that we stay on top of those risks, and we're keeping ARMC posted that if anything's starting to look off track, the flag goes up. Some of that might be at an early stage to say, look, this isn't critical, but we need to do something corrective here. We want to come back to you with a very genuine view of where things are, and if something's not quite right, we want to say so. There'll be an early assessment from Audit New Zealand towards the beginning of or middle of September. Now, that's not a formal thing. It doesn't get reported to the public, but it is a WAF that says, look, if you do this, you'll see where your soft spots are, where your weaknesses are, and you can work on those, and you've got time to fix it before the critical Christmas point. We actually asked for that because they used to do it in November, and of course by then it's all a bit too late. The horse is bolted. So look, this is really the kickoff for this afternoon's scene setter on finance and infrastructure, and then we go into activity plans on the 1st of August. Those plans will be loaded today or tomorrow for you as councillors, so that you can see everything that's been built across all activities. They'll be at the briefings. After each briefing, they'll be uploaded and available to the public, which was a specific request in the letter of expectation that there's more transparency. And of course, these briefings are going to be recorded, and those recordings will also be released to the public on the website. So that's all quite different from the old recipe. Exciting times, big ship being launched.
It's great, thank you. That's really good, Peter. So you're going to do these every month, aren't you? You're going to do these.
Yes.
This update. Okay.
Yeah.
Also, probably and I do it when we have the Te Kaha team come in as well. So I'm going to ask you maybe an uncomfortable question every month, but I just want to understand from you if there are any issues or any worries you have about the LTP at this point in time, because I think you've done them, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way. You've done them for so long, you'll know if it's on track or if it's not. So from your point of view, is there anything we should be worried about?
The upside is we are in the strongest position, I believe, of any council in New Zealand right now. There are plenty of councils who are still trying to figure out what their letter of expectation should have in it. Yeah. We have essentially the bones of a draft LTP in the middle of the year with 6 months to get it right. So that's the good news. Bad news is there's a lot of uncertainty, but we've talked about how to deal with that. So look, my feeling at this point is it's ours to lose.
Okay, that's really useful. Just one thing, and I see Lynn's there as well. Just wondered, mate, do you want to just jump up, just in terms of the public, so the public sort of facing side of this, because the council have made it very, very clear, and I think there's been general consensus between ELT and us that it would be public facing. Do you want to just lay out sort of how you envisage those recordings and that working, just so that anyone watching is aware of those sort of expectations for the next wee while. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Look, there isn't budget for the full roadshow like a council meeting. They'll be recorded on Teams. The protocol that we've got built for heads of service is that when they're presenting their activity plans to you, that will be public, it will be recorded, and it will be available to the public in the next 24 to 48 hours on the website. We have asked that if their activity plan broaches matters of employment redundancy or commercial in confidence matters, that they reserve those for the end of the presentation so that they're not recorded, because it's obviously not fair on staff or any business we're aligned with to have confidential matters go out to the public before they're even decided. So there's a clear protocol there. We're going to ask councillors to obviously observe it as well. Otherwise, it's all public. The plan will be released to the public. The recording will be released to the public. We have a Q&A process for councillors. If they want to ask questions about anything post the event, they can put it through the same one we used for the annual plan. So that way the database is kept, and if the same question keeps getting asked, we can give a consistent answer.
Okay.
So that's how we intend to process that. There'll probably be some newsline releases with some of the activities if they contain matters of public interest or engagement. There'll be a newsline piece to inform the briefing, so it doesn't just drop cold. Otherwise, it'll be essentially almost an echo of a standard council meeting in terms of what's available.
So just in terms of, because we've sort of talked about it a wee bit, just in terms of the timing of those, and again, I'm just looking for anyone watching, they won't be, like if we had a briefing today, we won't put them out straight away though, will we? Because I guess the expectation would be we just check everything so that we're not putting anything in terms of employment relations or anything like that at sort of risk.
There's two parts. One is just the logistics of getting the recording and putting it somewhere and saying this is now live and checked. And the other one is that, we've just been clear that no employment redundancy or commercial in confidence matters have been accidentally left in the middle.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fantastic. And just one other one for me, and then I think Victoria's got a question, others may as well. How do you sort of envisage, so, I mean, the council was very clear in its letter of expectation around that capital delivery. Yep. And it, like you say, that's kind of a new way of doing things for us in terms of putting a bit of reality through that 10-year plan. How do you envisage that working? So, I mean, I imagine we'll work through it in briefings, but the teams must already be working at some level to kind of understand that expectation of council. Is that fair to say?
It is. Look, there was a good discussion at ELT the other day, and the activity plan tells the story of what the activity is trying to do and the resources it needs and that kind of thing. But the capital program team have developed, you might remember from the last LTP, the lava diagrams that show you the build-up of what they're trying to achieve. That's currently in its raw state, meaning it's too much. But they've transposed historic deliverability on that, along with future deliverability forecasting to show you what we think that portfolio will be able to do and what's above that line. So in other words, the size of the challenge, what we think we can do, what we've historically done. So that's the launching point for that conversation.
Okay, that's really useful. Thank you. Victoria.
Thank you. At 3.12, you talk about your progress update in your paper and saying we're largely on track, but there was an overlap with the annual plan process and there was some stress around resourcing. So my question to you is about resourcing and whether the resourcing is now settled to levels that is going to allow you to do this piece of work comfortably, or whether you've still got a bit of a risk there with resourcing.
That was really the June period where we were doing annual plan and LTP at the same time. So that overlap was a bit punishing. We're kind of now at the other side of the annual plan. It's been to print. It's going to go out the door. So really, the same people were doing both, and that was a pretty tight period of about 6 to 8 weeks there. But I think we're kind of at the other end. It doesn't mean that it's free and easy, because we've still got year end and annual report and all of that stuff. But the really tight choke point is probably over now.
I would like to add that councillors can actually help, and that is in the context of choosing which questions you actually need to ask and which are going to be significantly impactful in terms of the decisions you're going to make. Because During the annual plan process, we had over 300 questions. That requires quite a lot of resourcing, and you have the entire right to ask any questions you like. However, I do invite you to apply your judgment as to what are significant questions that will really advance your understanding of the decisions that we need to make, as compared with any question that might occur in relation to any of the activity plans. But that's something that we can work through, and we will certainly give you any feedback if that volume of questions is creating some challenges in a resourcing sense.
Thank you. I've got another question around some of the other issues and risks that you have raised. You're talking about successful partnership with stakeholders in 3.26.6. I'm aware of the public-facing campaign that's running, and you also spoke about the work you've been doing with mana whenua. But is there anything else that we're doing differently in this round for this LTP that we haven't done before in terms of engaging with our stakeholders? Are there any gaps? Is there anything we need to know about? And are we satisfied that we're covering all that off for stakeholders well enough going into this?
Look, I'm not sure I'm the absolute expert in this area because it's Katie who's probably more informed than I am, but we are doing a lot more work with Christchurch NZ, for example, than historically we would have done at this point. I think I'd probably rather understand the current situation from Katie on engagement than just have a punt at it off the hip.
Sure, happy to follow that up with Katie. Thanks.
Dawn, you had a comment, and then we've got Celeste.
Thank you, Chair. It's a comment, and maybe also to add to the question that Councillor Henstock has asked. So it's to reinforce my very polite Assistant Chief Executive's point to elected members. Our joint development, as we know when we did it in 2021, was completely new for everybody and probably was new in New Zealand. We have evolved that much further in this next period. But ultimately, that maturity of how we work together is going to really rely on the need to ensure that the work we do as your officers providing you with information is matched by the nature of the questions that members then ask. My plea to you in simple terms is that those questions are considered to enable you to have better evidence-based decision making rather than a catch-all view of the world, because this is so significant, the LTP, that I want to ensure that staff resource is targeted to deliver the best solutions for you. That is why you're getting it in its rawest form at this point. So I just want to reinforce that matter. In relation to our engagement, I think Victoria, again, I think we are ahead of the pack in terms of what's happening in New Zealand. And we're constantly trying to think of new ways of doing it that doesn't overlay the view of the public, which is stop asking us these things and get on with it. So we've got to balance that right in terms of the pre-engagement through to engagement through to consultation. And there is absolutely a role for elected members in your dialogue, in your communities, through your community boards, etc., that we need to be able to utilise as well. So those would be my reflections.
No, that's useful. Thank you. Celeste.
Thanks, Peter. I just have a specific question in relation to 3.17 around the climate resilience work.
Yep.
I know there's quite a bit of work going on in that space and that we're doing things differently this time round. At what stage will we get a sort of more of an update on the detail of how that'll look? And as part of that, what are we thinking the public visibility will be on that work? Because I can imagine we'll get a lot of questions around how we're tracking against our emissions targets. And I know that a lot of the strategy is a 30-year timeline, but we are looking at sort of a 7-year timeline in terms of delivering some of these targets. So just getting some visibility and sort of more in-depth understanding on that work.
Yep. There's two levels to it. One is if you like, the bottom-up shop floor view. So every activity plan has a section on climate resilience to say, this is how this activity is giving effect to climate resilience goals. So that's at the operational sharp end. There's also blocks of time set up through the 6 months for, if you like, the overview. So financial overview, capital overview, there'll be an element in there on climate resilience stuff to say, collectively, this is what all this adds up to against our goals. So, yeah, micro and macro, I guess, is the answer to that. because it is essential that you have visibility about what, say, transport or whatever is doing around these goals, but also how their overall effect looks. So that's built into the program.
Great, thank you.
Yanni.
Just in terms of the timetable, I guess I was just a bit concerned that some of the strategic development that we're doing won't be adopted in time to inform the activity management plans. And I mean, to give you the classic examples, the sports facilities network plan. So how are we getting synergy between the strategies that we're developing to inform the LTP versus the discussion on each activity management plan in terms of the timetable?
Because every LTP takes basically about a year, there's always something happening that is slightly out of kilter with that year. So what we can do is, it's case dependent. If the strategy is starting to firm up, we can look for that to be built into the draft or built into the final, because remember, there is February to June next year as another window to make adjustments. But if the strategy isn't looking firm by June of next year, then it becomes a flexibility issue about either altering the LTP or using an annual plan to catch up. So it's kind of like, at what point is the strategy firm enough to actually use?
Yeah, well, I mean, like for this one in particular, I've been running since 2015. It was supposed to inform the 2015 LTP. And I guess I'm just getting increasingly concerned that it's not even going to be able to inform this LTP, which is the third one that we would have done in that time. So
what we can do, Councillor Johansson, is to raise this with Nigel Cox and ensure that as part of his presentation on the activity plan and asset management plan, that he references the state of the strategy and those strategic issues that need to be
I mean, this
incorporated.
won't be a new question. I mean, council staff will be well aware of the concern I've raised around the sports network plan and the timing. So I guess I was only
I think what Lynn has clarified though is that they're happy to raise it with the relevant staff. So the point of this is to raise it here.
Yeah,
and
and
take
the only thing I was going to suggest is like whether the date from which that activity gets reported back to us for the workshop or the briefing or whatever, whether that needs to be just pushed out so that we get more time to get the plan in place before we have that discussion.
I think what we need to reflect on is that the currency of all of our strategies rolls over at a different sequence and cadence from our long-term plan. In addition, we may well have undertaken elements under strategies that have previously been adopted, which we now find we cannot afford. So as part of the LTP process, there will be trade-offs and there will possibly be a need to review strategies after the LTP, because we will not necessarily be able to deliver across the board of what can be quite aspirational documents. So I think it's a valid context within which the LTP debate and discussions are occurring, but I think there will possibly be some subsequent changes to strategy, which we will need to bring forward to you in terms of a program of how we do that.
Okay, thank you. That's been a really useful update, and I look forward to them coming through regularly. I'm happy to move it. Pauline's happy to second it. Any discussion? I mean, the only thing I'd say is it was really heartening to hear that we're sort of well ahead of the pack in terms of right across the country, and that public-facing side is sort of, really, I think, going to be a real advantageous for the whole city as we do it. But again, just taking your points around cautioning the expectations around when that will be released. So I guess our expectation is that it's thoroughly worked through before it's put into the public domain to avoid any undue anxiety into the community. So while we may have a briefing, for example, today, it wouldn't be our expectation that's released today until you've been able to actually make sure it's sort of properly put into that public domain appropriately. So thank you for all the work you do, and we look forward to seeing you a lot more. So we'll put that to the vote. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. We'll close the meeting with the closing karakia.